Welcome to our latest series on sustainability in the construction and quarrying industries, where we put the questions to leaders from Cummins, Volvo construction equipment and Topcon positioning systems. Here we ask them, can you be sustainable and still make money? Is it financially viable for contractors to maximise the sustainability of their operations, win bids and still make a profit? If so, can you elaborate on how embracing sustainable technology is leading to more affordable and cost-effective operations? If not, is there emerging funding options that are there to facilitate this transition for contractors and quarry operators?
Of course, there are a lot of regional differences. Only looking into EU, for example, that some countries still have incentives, some countries do not, and so on. We have done studies, for example, showing that if you look at the total project cost for building a road or a big warehouse or something, that the added cost for having sustainable technology is not more than 1 to 2% of the total project cost extra. So it's also to lift the perspective for the project requesters, that they must be willing, okay, are you willing to pay 1% extra or not? Because if you look isolated at the contractor part moving the material, then it becomes expensive. So it's about lifting the perspective a lot. But then, of course, there are applications already today. Underground application is one of them, where you have a big cost on ventilation, for example, that you get rid of when moving to electric. Very different pictures, regional and also from application to application and so on. And also the key to lift the horizon a bit and perspective.
Michael, it's not one size fits all, as Pontus is saying, is it? And are you willing to pay 1 or 2% more as your company?
Well, the way that we look at it here at Topcon is when you really look at things over the long term, in many cases, sustainability actually results in lowering long-term cost. So that's probably the most significant thing. And those lower costs, in many cases, they may be because you've got increased efficiency in the machine. It may be that because you're moving more material and those kinds of things. And so when you're more and more efficient and those machines have better on-time performance, as well as you have less waste, where you're coming in on target, on estimate, on budget, those kinds of things really help drive those. I would say that you're talking a little bit about incentives, and so there are various Green Deal programs that we've seen around the world. Probably one of the first and easiest is adding telematics to the machine, because when you add telematics to the machine, now we have the ability to capture the data layers to prove the value proposition that we're talking about, so that then you can see that we have reduced cost over the longer term.
If we're looking at longer term, though, and some companies aren't willing to do that. Jeremy, I want to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, I think the answer is, probably time dependent, and I think it's going to evolve, right? If you think about, requirements that are put in that are going to affect financial viability, if it's some kind of a requirement that says you need latest spec engines, as an example, or latest emission, I think those are really good. They offer a lot of benefit in the here and now. Newer spec equipment is definitely a little bit more expensive than probably prior vintages, but when you think about reduced fluid consumption over the life of the machine, you think about extended maintenance intervals, you think about those type of things. It may not completely offset that, but that puts, I think, a decent amount of money back to the bottom line for the contractors doing the work. And maybe to build on a earlier comment, connectivity. From our perspective as a prime mover, we also partner with leading telematics providers in the industry. Topcon as an example. I firmly believe that having those systems in place and everybody kind of working together is without a doubt going to highlight a lot of inefficiencies in processes, maybe operator training. But I can take two people, put them in the same piece of equipment, and my guess is somebody who knows what they're doing can do that job much, much more efficiently than somebody like me could do it. And, hard to claim those benefits, I think, in a regulatory environment, but in the real world, as far as how much emissions output you have to get a given job done, huge impacts, I think, are likely to come out of that as the market, further embraces digitalization. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Pontus, we're talking about opportunities, but I just want to come back to these short-term extra costs. Do you know of any emerging funding options that are there to facilitate the transition for contractors and quarry operators?
There are countries where the government are willing to pay extra for road builds, road projects, and so on, if it can be done from a CO2 neutral perspective, way, and so on. And so, but also important to point out that there are three strong cases for driving emission-free work sites, and one is that customers that want to decarbonize and have signed up to the Paris Agreement, etc., and so on. And then sort of emission-free work zones, etc., is becoming a must for get the license to work. That is already happening. And then, of course, the third one, as we mentioned, that the solutions, sustainable solutions, will increasingly be more and more cost competitive. And we see in Europe, for example, that quarries, they are basically in parity already today, but then it's about getting the products out together with the services and everything.
Michael, how important is it for those funding options to be there to facilitate this transition?
Well, for the most part, the economics of the adoption of the technology are in many cases already there. The various support programs from the government, basically they become an accelerant, right? They just increase the adoption, right? I think they also work to increase and help expand the scope of the opportunity through the workflow. It's the idea that it might be that the economics of a particular technology on a bulldozer or a motor grader or a paver accomplish machine control on the machine. And then it's the coordination, right? That the additional environmental benefits or the additional savings of on-time logistics. The idea that you've got less material on the road, and that it delivers to the paver on time with less emissions, things like that, as well as on temperature. I think that it's a combination of both the economics as well as the additional incentives, whether they're incentives in safety or they're environmental incentives, right? In both cases, I think that you see significant opportunities on the sustainability side that help drive the adoption of the technology.